So this week we're back with Tony, and we're going to talk about the Trump trial. So hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Mish. Hope you enjoyed the last couple of weeks. They were an episode on continuing conversation on the Constitution. Enjoy your feedback. Please keep it coming, and share, like, and subscribe. With me for another episode, at least one, will be guest host Tony Moffatt. Welcome, Tony.
Impersonating a guest host again.
Yeah, here you are.
Here I am.
So, your checks will be soon delivered.
Forthcoming.
To you. Yeah.
All right.
So
I'm going to go on strike eventually.
So be it. So Dusty's out there. He went to cheer on one of our gym members. Is up competing in a CrossFit. I can't remember if it's regional or something like that, but the next tier up out of the CrossFit Games, Mary Helen, and she's really, really good, and she has a chance of getting beyond that after this competition. So he's rooting her on with his family and a number of other folks from our gym.
It's fantastic. Good luck to them. Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, good luck, Mary Helen, and I know her husband's a regular listener of the podcast. So.
Fantastic.
So we talked Constitution last week, and then something crazy happened. And while you're listening to this will have been a few days ago, but to us it was last night. Verdict came out in the Trump trial, the quote-unquote hush money trial. There were 34 charges, 11 counts of falsifying invoices, 12 counts of falsifying ledger entries, 11 counts of issuing checks with false notations, recorded as legal retainers signed by Trump. So those are the charges. There's a whole lot of hubbub about the charges. It was highly unusual from start to finish, the whole thing. So I just wanted to chit-chat about that. And Tony and I were just talking about, hey, we're not legal scholars, but we're people that are affected by things like this. And if you don't think you're affected by or you don't think that you are affected by this, you're sadly mistaken, because this kind of thing can happen to, if it can happen to that guy, it can happen to anybody. So anyway, just some initial thoughts from you, Tony.
My initial thoughts are somewhat confused, I think, by the outcome, because as I listen to people who are legal scholars and by the way, I tend to turn to sort of a hostile witness sort of a person. So, for instance, like an Alan Dershowitz, who is a Harvard legal professor, constitutional scholar, but he's also a liberal Democrat, so he's on the other side of the aisle politically from Donald Trump. Is very critical about the way in which things have been carried out, and the technical aspects of the trial. And so I'm very concerned about that something so overtly political can happen. And as you say, if that Pandora's box has been opened, then what does that say to folks who don't have the means to mount a defense against the state? That starts to become very fearsome territory that we, as a country, we're generally not willing to go near that third rail, and so it's a little bit disconcerting, and it's very disappointing to me.
Yeah, agreed. And there is a certain, the legal hubbub and the corporate media news speakers, even some of those that I've had, no respect for in the past from their other pronouncements on all matters legal or whatever. Even they are just starting to say, hey, this is kind of ridiculous, which is an indication that how ridiculous it is. If even they, who don't seem to be big fans of Donald J. Trump, that they would think, hey, this is beyond the pale.
Yes.
Yeah. So I have a quote. Actually, I'm going to save that quote for later. It's a quote from A Man for All Seasons. We'll get to that in a minute. Maybe I'll finish that because I have a quote for every situation.
Good.
So
I have a movie or a song title for every situation.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I have a movie for you.
Oh, what's the movie?
So I'm calling this the Minority Report trial.
Yeah.
If you recall, that was Tom Cruise, Steven Spielberg back in like 2002.
Yeah.
And basically it was the pre-crime convictions. They would go after people who were contemplating committing a crime.
Yeah.
And they would arrest them. And so a lot of this trial had to do with what Donald Trump's intent was.
Right.
So I'm calling it the Minority Report trial.
It's eerily like that. And there was another trial with E. Jean Carroll that the New York legislature created they changed the law to expand the statute of limitations so they could go after him, which reeks of that ex post facto protections that the landowners, went after King John, and that's how the Magna Carta was created. Like that's not right. If you create a law or alter a law, and then so now I can just go after you, even though at the time it wasn't illegal. That just seems ridiculous, and it reeks. This whole thing reeks of that. One of the things, the most obvious one to me, just marching backwards, because we'll get to their star witness, was the judge's instructions to the jury. And I think we're all familiar with jury trial. It's got to be unanimous. In fact, that movie, 12 Angry Men, where there's one juror in the movie that says, or play, I think is what it started off with, was not convinced of the guilt of this person. And those, the other people, they're just trapped in this room, and these guys are just haggling over this, and he starts to one by one convince them that, hey, there is a reasonable doubt in this particular case. And in the end, they went over, they all unify around that decision. That only the one person was convinced of. So anyway, my point in that is unanimous jury. Well, this judge said, it's possible that you could have in this, and he just makes up this scenario for them. You could have 4, 4, and 4 for the various, kind of like a buffet, if you will, of the charges. And 4 of you say this charge over here, 4 of you say that charge over there, and 4 of you say that charge over there. Well, that's unanimous. That is now counted as unanimous, which is not. It's not the way things are done. But that was the written instructions that were read. They could not take those instructions. There was like a 50-page set of instructions for the jury. They couldn't take them into the jury room where they're deliberating, so they had to come out every once in a while, review, and then go back in. So just unusual. I don't know what your thoughts on just that aspect of it.
There was a tidbit that I picked up in my research for the show that there are technical problems with the instructions to the jury, and I don't want to try to even be technical about the law, but there are technical problems with it, and the Trump team did not object to all of them, or some portion of the critical ones. Which caused me to think about Donald J. Trump's track record with hiring legal counsel. Hasn't been so great, and apparently it might have bit him again on this. So that was one thought about that. But then some of them are just very egregious. It was almost like you had an activist judge in this case, and I really have a hard time believing that that's something that the American people want is activism in the judicial system.
Do you think that was a strategic move by the legal team?
No, I actually don't, because if my understanding now is that if they don't object to that, then they cannot appeal it.
Okay.
They can't appeal those instructions to the jury, and so in my estimation, I think the way I might strategically game plan something like this is, well, we're not going to get this solved in this courtroom. We're going to have to take it to a higher court, and so I would want to seed the clouds for every potential appeal that I possibly could.
Right.
And so it seemed like a missed opportunity to me.
You mentioned, I don't want to lose this, activist judge. It seemed like an activist judge. Are you tracking that relationship he has with the Biden-Harris campaign?
I am.
Donated like $9.2 million to that campaign.
I just don't want to come right out and say, what I would really like to do is have a conversation about just the merits of this. There's plenty. You can find any number of partisan hand wringing out there on both sides of this. What I'm really concerned about, it kind of goes back to our constitutional conversation about the Bill of Rights over the last couple of weeks. I'm very concerned about the rule of law in this country, and if you start going down that dark path where the legal system is infected by the politics, perhaps I'm not sure how to exactly articulate that, but if you go down that path, that has never led to good places, in the history when things like that have happened in Europe or other places in the world.
All right, now is a good time to read my quote. So this is from A Man for All Seasons, like I said before, and the scenario is the recommendation was to let's just get rid of these laws. Let's just get rid of that law that the people think you violated. So the response to that, to his advisor, the Man for All Seasons, the currents and eddies of right and wrong, which you find such plain sailing, I can't navigate. I'm no voyager, but in the thickets of the law, there I'm a forester. In other words, I can navigate the laws. I doubt if there's a man alive who could follow me there. When the last law was down and the devil turned around, so in other words, if I let's just sweep all laws, and I just get rid of them all. Now anything I did was not illegal. When the last law was down and the devil turned around on you, where you would hide, Roper, the laws all being flat, this country's planted thick with laws from coast to coast, man's laws, not God's. And if you cut them down, you're just the man to do it. Do you really think that you could stand upright in the winds that would blow then? Yes, I'd give the devil benefit of law for my own safety's sake. So in other words, if I get rid of all the laws, well, there's nothing now to protect me.
Yeah. Let me take you back to a previous episode where something, I think this is developing into something that has happened to us very recently. If you remember, the United States Senate that was democratically controlled under the Obama administration got rid of the filibuster, which was a rule in which any senator could obstruct the proceedings that were going on. A bill could basically just stop a bill in its tracks by just talking long enough.
Right.
Filibustering is is a term for just kind of what we're doing right now.
Right.
We're filibustering, just going talking. On and on. That's the what was the Jimmy Stewart movie?
Mr. Something goes
to Washington. Yeah, he does an epic marathon filibuster,
an
to stop
actual
a law.
filibuster, not just procedural.
It has since become just a procedural filibuster where you don't actually, but in his time you actually had to stand up there and do the marathon and talk and get some help. But they suspended the filibuster for a very specific reason, so that they could push through a Supreme Court nominee on the Democrat side, on the liberal side. Not trying to be partisan about it, but their main opponent, main Republican opponent in the Senate said, you shouldn't do this. You're going to rue the day that you do this. Turns out that's exactly how Donald Trump, in the end of his term, got so many Supreme Court justices seated because of that filibuster rule. The opposition couldn't oppose it, couldn't right. stop it. This seems like another one of those, you really don't want to open this box. I don't care how ideologically driven you are, how focused you are in that way. And so I see a lot of similarities between those two, between what has happened yesterday and what happened there with the Senate filibuster.
Right. That I think, and I'm not the first person to bring this up. Megyn Kelly talked about this. that there is a precedent has been set, and it should make everybody quake in their boots, not only like your normal citizen, but past office holders.
Absolutely.
So when you look at just a list, I'll just read some of these things. So we know that presidents and former presidents can be impeached. We know that former presidents and former presidents can be forced to reveal tax and business records. We know that they lose executive privilege. That's no longer a thing anymore. They lose attorney-client privilege because no longer are those conversations privileged communications. They can be forced to release private phone records and text messages. Again, this is all presidents and former presidents. They can have their homes raided by the FBI. They can be subpoenaed by committees, can be repeatedly indicted and arrested, can lose their First Amendment right to free speech with those gag orders, lose the right to a jury trial. VP no longer has authority to question validity of disputed electoral votes because, if you recall that whole thing in the 2020 election, the purpose of the President of the Senate, also known as
Vice President of the United States,
is to certify and say, yes, this conforms to the count based off of all the legal. If there's any legal wranglings in any question, then they deliberate on that. They're supposed to go and deliberate. Well, they just changed the law recently. They is in the Democrats. The losing party no longer has authority to submit contingent electors when results are disputed, and presidents and former presidents don't have presidential immunity. So this is a boomerang that's going to come back, and it's going to come back in an ugly, ugly way, because it's a foregone conclusion that Trump is going to get elected on this next election. I mean, the more this type of thing happens to him, the more support he gets. He goes into a deep blue pocket of deep blue state in the Bronx and has record show out for people excited about President Trump. And now they're even more excited. When you go to the Man on the Street interviews, they are just pumped up because they see this as wrong, this trial.
Indeed. Well, and I think they rightly see it as wrong. Am I allowed to say that?
Sure.
I think they have rightly intuited, and this is the thing I love about just Americans in general. We've got a very strong sense of fair play. And this is a dirty pool, and so I think people see that, but there's some legitimate concern, I believe, and I think it always comes down to this. There's some legitimate concern with the sort of like the low information voters and things like that, who might say, well, a felony conviction is just enough for me,
right,
and not delve into even what we have just been talking about. Some of the here are 18 different ways that this was not handled correctly, and I really think that what I would like to drive it back to is encourage people to think, whatever you might think about Donald Trump or Joe Biden, doesn't matter. Would I want to face something like this where I straight up have a political enemy who wants to use the judicial system against me? Primarily because most Americans just simply can't afford that.
Right.
You would be, even if you're exonerated, you might be ruined financially in something like that. And so it's a very personal question in that, do I want to live in a country where the judicial system can be used against me in a fiat sort of a way, in a way that just is because of the people in power happen to see it a certain way. And I think that we've always labored under the assumption that the judiciary is, the saying was always justice is blind, right? Mm-hmm. And so we've always kind of labored under that assumption that justice actually is blind, and that it's even for you and me, or it's even for a former president, or anybody for that matter. And I think now we're seeing that ways that it can be manipulated. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that everybody should be concerned about, and should be very careful to make your decisions not just based on what you hear in the media, but to make your decisions based on that instinct, that fairness instinct. Would I want to face this kind of a prosecution.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that is that's a way that people can sort of navigate what is about to happen. That list that you read there is a terrifying list. That's Soviet sort of things that you might hear. Things being just arbitrarily suspended for an individual.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't, I think you and I talked about when we were on the Constitution conversation. I'll see if I can stick the landing on my ramble here, but on our Constitution conversation about, the progressive era. And I think what we're seeing in a lot of ways are the fruits of that culminating. It's coming to, all of the fruits are coming into full bloom
Mm-hmm.
of what the progressive era has given us. And unfortunately, they're not all good.
Yeah, and a lot of that produced a lot of just opinion-based and what feels good, and the ends justify the means rather than justice being blind. The law says this. I might not like this guy at all, but the star witness is a known liar, let's say, hypothetically. Let's say that he's been caught lying, and he got caught lying several times to Congress, to other trials, to legal proceedings, like official lies, not just bragging in the bar. Right. And did shady dealings, like he stole money in order to do something else. We don't know what he did with that money, but he said he was doing this. But again, he's a proven and admitted, he admits to lying, all this. But that's your witness on all these counts. So the prosecution in this case said, well, it proves that he is telling the truth now because it doesn't make him look good. Well, that's a pretty flimsy excuse, because anybody, you and I, could be in cahoots and work together to make accusations against somebody else on, whatever, any topic. And I could lie all about it. And then I could tell more lies to cover up those lies so that you and I can make sure that this guy goes to jail. And that's okay because, well, it doesn't look good that I lie, so it proves that I'm telling the truth now because it doesn't look good that I lie.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't pass a sniff test.
Well, and typically one of the things that I learned from the discussion with Dershowitz was listening to him talk. He and another guy named Mark Garagos were on with Megyn Kelly about, I don't know, 4 or 5 days ago, just as the jury was being adjourned, sent off with their instructions. And one of the things that I learned was that's typically something that the defense would bring forward to say, but you're a liar. You have pled guilty to all these things and that sort of thing, precisely for what you just said. The reason that it's not usually admitted for the prosecutor to be able to say that in this complex argument, but it's exactly what you just said. It makes it puts in front of the jury that, well, these guys have all been convicted for the same thing, then the defendant must be guilty. Mm-hmm. Which is, according to the Constitution and all of our legal findings for years and years, is that the state or the prosecution can't do anything that sort of underhandedly indemnify
right.
or makes the defendant look worse. That's not just evidentiary based and aimed directly at whatever the charges are. Mm-hmm. And but they were allowed to sort of run rampant in that way. So it's it's a complete departure from legal precedent in this case as well, and I think a bad one.
Yeah.
The judge has very clearly allowed those things to happen, and for purpose, it seems, in order to achieve a certain end. And it causes me to wonder a little bit. We had the conversation about whether there were strategic things going on here. If they get a quick, even if the trial is run in such a botched way that they get a quick verdict in a very partisan district, if they get a quick verdict, that's fine, because now they can go out on the campaign trail and talk about convicted felon and all that sort of thing. The overturning of, the appeals process can't start. It will take its time, and, the actual overturning might be years in the future.
Right.
And so it'll be long after it has its intended effect, which could be strategic. Maybe they don't care whether it ever sticks. And so I think the notion for most Americans in that regard is we shouldn't be able to use the legal system in such a frivolous way in order to just delay something or to cause a political outcome. It just should not be that way. I think I'll speak for myself, but I believe that, most Americans would say, yeah, I just don't think you ought to be able to manipulate election outcomes, or you shouldn't be able to manipulate other things with using the legal system.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you feel about that.
That exactly, like the whole thing just looks like legal manipulation or lawfare in order to have a certain effect, and the consequences of the actual trial, whether or not it gets overturned, I really don't think they care. The interesting part, and this could be typical. I don't follow these things regularly, but the sentencing occurs on July 11th. Yeah. Consequently, the next week, or maybe not consequently, by chance, the Republican National Convention, where Trump is the presumptive nominee, is the next week, 15th to the 18th. So ostensibly, he could be sitting in a jail cell in Manhattan somewhere while the convention's going on, and maybe be able to live stream from his jail cell. But can you imagine that? Our nominee is Mr. Donald J. Trump, and then they cut to a scene of him or his mugshot
in his orange jumpsuit suit.
So it's crazy.
Well, or I'm sure that they will see him as a flight risk, and so he'll have an ankle bracelet or something on, even if he is at the national convention. He'll be a convicted felon with with an ankle bracelet awaiting appeal.
An ankle bracelet, but maybe covered up by one of those boots that people will wear to. Mm-hmm. Oh, I hurt my ankle, so I'm wearing, or hurt my foot, so I have to have this medical boot on.
Well, I think he'll make a big deal out of it. It's like, here, let me show everybody my ankle bracelet.
Yeah, it just appears to be like they say. The jargon is lawfare. That's what it seems like to me. All of these trials, because all of these prosecutors that have been bringing charges up, every one of them that was their goal when they were running for election, was I'm going to get Trump, and they finally, quote unquote, have him.
So let me ask you about that, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this. It has always struck me as odd in our country, and I mean always, not just because of this, but it's always struck me as odd that in state elections, judges and district attorneys have to run for election. It seems odd to me, and I can't really think of, and I probably need to just study this more, but I can't really think of the case for crossing politics and judiciary in that way. Federal judges, I believe all federal judges are appointed and confirmed, right, by the Senate. It strikes me that states might do well to do that, but it's an odd mix, I think, to have the judges have to run for political office, and both this judge and this district attorney are going to have to come back up for re-election. I just can't think of a scenario where it wouldn't be on their mind that if we, let Donald Trump go, that we'll never get reelected. And so I've just always thought that was it seems like a built-in conflict of interest, and I'm not sure I quite understand the case for having elected judges and district attorneys.
So we mentioned that earlier, and I didn't really give an opinion because the alternative being the assumed alternative is that a judge, or in your case also a district attorney, would be nominated by some other official and then committed and then put forth to a vote and then yay or nay for a legislative body. I kind of like that as a general rule. At least on the federal courts, that's the way they do business, because you're talking about a large scope.
Right.
And the value of that is out of those three branches of government, there was it's a fruit of the progressive era, a notion that we have three co-equal, which that's not right grammar, but anyway, branches of government. Well, no, we don't. The courts were specifically designed to not be this strong group. They are just kind of off on the side. They're still part of that constitutional structure, but the legislature is supposed to be the preeminent, the strongest of the three branches of government, followed by executive, then judicial. Set that aside. When it comes to lesser courts, and when I say lesser, I don't mean the lesser federal ones, but I mean like the state courts, the courts of appeals, the circuit courts, the municipal courts. I don't know if I'm necessarily against them voting, and I'm just going to keep judges for now on this rant.
Sure.
Or monologue. It's more of a monologue. I don't know, because when you're talking scope, I want perhaps that municipal judge to be accountable to the people directly, rather than, and he can be impeached. There's nothing that says he can't be impeached. We always think impeachment of a president, and that's
right.
kind of where it ends. But any office holder can be impeached. And I think if we were a lively and active citizenry, we would focus on that. Like, what did the Judge Smith say in this trial against my neighbor over here when he ran the red light? He's kind of a dangerous driver, and it's probably good that he gets fined. Just kind of pay attention to those kinds of things. Or he just let him go because he felt bad for him, because he's run red lights his whole life. That's shoddy. And I don't want that. I want him to be accountable to me, maybe. But on the flip side, if you're not paying attention, it would be better if someone that is paid or elected to pay attention, that they're doing it. So I'm kind of torn on it. District attorneys, I kind of like the idea of us voting for them, that they're accountable to the local population rather than another group. Although I could see an argument, kind of like 60-40 on that, on the district attorney
right.
end of it. Now, when it comes to state attorneys general and federal attorneys general, I like the process that we have where they're vetted in another way rather than direct voting.
Sure. It causes me to wonder when it crosses over between the state, what you have here is the felony. It's a felony conviction, so it's a national sort of a conviction. There's a blur there, question of whether there was even jurisdiction in the first place in this particular case, and so I know that there's no simple answer to it, but I am very concerned about the lawfare aspect of this, where the judicial case has been so intertwined with the political problem or the political outcomes in an election year, and that the judiciary has been used in such a way that it's seeking apparently political outcomes. And so it seems like a bearing fruit again of the conflict of interest that I see in directly voting for and running for office, and then sitting in judgment over the people who elected you, essentially. And so I'm not sure I'm not sure specifically in this case. I can't say whether that in general is a bad idea or a good idea, but one of the things that also came to mind was, there were some reports of a juror being released because they were just quite frankly afraid of being involved in the case because of the backlash that they might get from people publicly, and a lot of ways that the judge could have handled that that I won't go into, but failed to do any of them. but the fear aspect of things, that there will be backlash from the public on a certain outcome, and what they were afraid of was if Donald Trump is acquitted of all of this, then there will be backlash, as in physical violence toward them and their families, which is realistic. There's a history of that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Once jurors are found out and people don't like the outcome and that sort of thing. And so, I believe that I am wondering and beginning to think that maybe the fact that you have to run for office and that sort of thing really colors this in a way that you just can't you can't make the case that this was purely justice based. It's there are all kinds of other. It's not the pure justice is blind argument. There are all kinds of other circumstances that color the outcomes and the actions of the people that are involved, and none of them are good for folks like us who are depending on the legal system to enforce the rule of law.
Let me ask you this, because I thought of this while you were describing that, and I completely get what you're saying, that the election of a judge seems kind of dirty now because he's got to play this political game. He's got to run for office, and that seems pretty. That seems like kind of filthy. Mm-hmm. Is our environment, our political environment, where smooth talkers that don't do anything? We've had this for decades now, at least. That flavor of politician that we've seen for the past, let's say, 75 years, that has now discolored and given us a bad taste in politics, where it shouldn't be like that. That has colored when we look at these judges and we say, well, they should be a little more pure than your typical politician. Where what I would argue is, well, these same people, the legislators that would vote on them, they should be even more pure than the guy that's judging the law and the facts of a case compared to the law, than the guy that's supposed to be writing law. He shouldn't be involved in politics either. He should. So how are we going to get around that? So my question really is, does our view of the current political state that is now just seems filthy and colored with money and influence, has that affected our view of what judges and we should be thinking a little bit broader maybe?
Well, I think my short answer is yes, that it is probably colored by our current view of politicians. I believe that's probably very true. I would also contend that this is nothing new in American politics. I mean, it's always been there. There's always been room for corruption when you're depending on people to act their best selves to make the political system work well. There's always going to be somebody who's not going to do that. And our history is full of interesting and shady characters. And all you have to do is just look at the prosecution teams on all four of these Trump trials, and you're looking at not a very impressive list of people.
Yeah, a rogues gallery.
A rogues gallery of not very interesting or impressive people. They're impressive to a certain constituency, and that's all they needed, because all they had to do was convince the constituency in that area to elect them in many cases. And so I think that it probably is colored by our current view of, well, a general malaise or a general distrust of just the institutions of the United States. I am not somebody who thinks that it needs to be just burned down, but we certainly need to do some introspective searching of the way that we have things set up, and try to figure out, if there's a better way for us to do things. But this is sort of the mindset that we're in, and so the problem has to be solved under these circumstances, whether we like it or not. But I would agree with you, but I'm not sure that matters. Whether it's being colored by our current general distaste for politicians. In a media environment, people who look great on camera, people who are humorous, people who have a magnetic presence, and we know plenty of folks like that, who just can walk in and command a room. Mm-hmm. Those sort of people, just because they can do all those things, or have the loudest voice,
right,
have the megaphone, none of those reasons are good reasons to put somebody in charge of a nation like the United States or any of its localities. And so I believe that it is the environment that we live in, and until we figure out how to be more critically thinking, and how to hold the people in the media more accountable to truth as opposed to ideology, I think that this is the situation that we're in. We're going to have to figure out how to navigate it.
Yeah. What you brought up reminded me of, I think it was Andrew Breitbart, that politics is downstream of culture.
Absolutely.
So we have this fascination culturally with the loudest voice, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So this person that by the fact of their very loud voice and being slightly witty and being able to grab attention, we automatically assume that that's leadership. And it's because we've been conditioned to this, to be entertained, to be fascinated by a particular person on just their appearance and delivery rather than the substance. The framers, they were highly guarded against those that sought leadership positions. And they know that they knew themselves and they knew history, which is you can't trust people that are put in positions of power. That's why they made this system that was incredibly difficult to get legislation passed. That's why they set up a Senate to where it guarded against high spikes in populism. That's why they had the rules that used to be the greatest deliberative body in the face of the earth in all history, or whatever it was, the U.S. Senate, because they would deliberate, and it would take forever to get something through the Senate when they used to be able to actually filibuster. And they would deliberate and deliberate and deliberate, and what that does is it's a calming notion that maybe that fervor has now died down, and it's not intentional. It's just by design that you slow the process down. So anyway, all that to say, you want people that are in those positions that don't necessarily want to be there, but they were kind of forced to because they know that if good men do not go and do these difficult things, who's going to go? Well, the people that want to get something out of it. Maybe these folks that are making millions of dollars while they're in office on stock trading, that's who's been going. And that because we're watching the bread and circuses. We're well fed, and we're watching the football games and the baseball games. I'm prone to this myself. The movies, the TV, the podcasts, except for ours. And we're just entertaining ourselves to death. Meanwhile, we've been robbed blind, literally. So anyway, I think being politics, to put a point to this, politics being downstream of culture, we're getting exactly what we would expect if we're not paying attention to what the politicians are doing and who is serving in political offices, because we should want somebody that, again, doesn't want to be there.
It's the one comment that I would make in agreeing with that is that the living under free speech makes it a very dirty, anybody can say anything they want to about anybody else, essentially. And it makes it a very dirty place. So those people that you would like to have in leadership positions, the credible leaders that are out there building businesses or communities doing good things, who are legitimate leaders, may not want to have anything to do with it. They don't, and particularly in the world of social media, where you can be found out and all kinds of terrible things, can be said about you and made up about you. It's a very difficult problem to figure out. How do you get quality people? How do you get the best of the best to actually take time out from their life and serve the country in a way without there being some other incentive? If the incentive is abuse and basically
abuse and infamy.
Abuse and infamy. Heck, great. Yeah, that's it. If that is the incentive, that's a perverse incentive. We've got to figure out a better way to get better quality people involved in both. I would say both in the political realm, and now that I'm thinking in this, political terminology about the judiciary, same. Just because you made it through law school doesn't automatically make you a stellar citizen.
Yeah, right.
And doesn't make you a leader. Doesn't make you any of these things. You can be a deadbeat and pass law school exams.
Right. Yeah, you can.
Indeed. So
in fact, isn't there some state that they've removed the passing the bar exam as maybe California?
I was going to say I think California did that a couple of years ago.
That's
there is one state I just don't recall who it is. Yes.
So maybe I can get one of those online law degrees, go to California, and not pass the bar exam and become a lawyer practicing in California once they completely devolve into just an utter mess.
Dystopian hellscape.
Yeah, which they're not far from.
You're late, I think.
Yeah.
You should have packed up and taken your family out a long time ago.
Too late. Well,
yes.
I wouldn't move there. I'll have an apartment there.
Okay. So you're gonna be a commuter lawyer.
That's right.
And you'll probably go to Northern California to wine country just so that you can anesthetize yourself.
That's right. That's right. That's decent wine. It is decent wine. Well, any other comments, remarks, any other thoughts?
So I am going to go back. So my theme has been, the political aspect of this. And the one quote that I brought, and I'm sorry, but I can't attribute it. I searched, but I can't attribute it. Somebody along the line, some smart, wise person said, you have to remember that judges are just politicians in robes. And for the longest time, I thought that was a cynical take on things, but reality has a way of bringing things into focus for people. And I think that I would just like to encourage everybody. I know we've kind of rambled around and there are a lot of things going on. It's just happened last night, and I haven't really had a lot of time to think about it, but just like to encourage everybody to think, very skeptically and very critically about what you hear going forward about this, and to try to, within your own ability or within your own desire, try to peel the onion back a layer or two so that you understand a little bit more about what the motivations might be or what is actually happening, what the truth of the case might be. We live in an environment now where much of the information that is out there is just either completely false or has been very doctored to fit a certain framing.
Yeah.
And so try to understand what the framing is and try to bounce that against your own ethics and morals in your decision making. I think you'll be much happier with yourself in the end.
Yeah. Yeah, and be skeptical and be particular. If you recall, I know I talked about this with you at least once, and I know I brought it up on the podcast before, the Smith-Mundt Act that was altered with the Defense Authorization Act in 2008, that propaganda by our intelligence agencies is completely legal. And I will ask the listener to hearken back the past several years over what they heard from the news and what they heard from corporate media with respect to any number of topics. And it doesn't seem to be a skeptical media that's asking skeptical questions of those in authority. It seems to be just this giant bandwagon. And there are different seats on two different sides, generally speaking, of that same bandwagon that's telling us certain things, to pay attention to this, to pay attention to that, and don't worry about this over here. Don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain. And I'm now at the point where if the corporate media says X, then I think negative X. And it seems to be working out okay for me because I still haven't died from the winter of death for not getting vaccinated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you still haven't melted from climate change either.
I have not. No.
Yeah.
I might buy some beachfront property like the Obamas, because our sea levels are going to rise.
The sea level's going to rise.
Yeah.
Yeah. Be a handsome insurance payout, I'm sure.
Yeah. It's funny because the insurance companies are not adjusting for this sea level rise. They don't care. They'll still insure you, which it seems like they would be the ones to be most concerned about this.
Topic for another podcast for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you about the skepticism. I encourage everybody to maintain a healthy level of skepticism about everything that you
Not my level, but a healthy level.
Yeah. What I prefer to say is, and this is, I think it's my own term, but I'm optimistically skeptical, or I maintain a skeptical level of optimism. I call it skeptimistic. I'm skeptimistic.
It's a portmanteau.
It's a portmanteau. Well, not exactly, because there's a mystic aspect of it also. So I'm trusting in a higher power, I think.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. No doubt. Any other thoughts on this?
Those are my thoughts, as muddled as they are. I really enjoyed just chatting about it.
Yeah.
And I hope that people will take it away and go do their own research and go figure it out.
Please do. Please do your research. There's a funny Jimmy Dore joke. Did I quote this last time?
I don't think so, but I've heard it recently, maybe somewhere else.
Yeah. So what he says is, for the listener, if you haven't heard it, check it out. Just, you Google it and you'll see it, perhaps. There was a lot of skepticism about the shot, and then skepticism about that skepticism. And he says, I do my own research before I get the shot, and people would be like, well, why would you do that? Why can't you trust the doctors? And he goes, well, has that ever been applied to any other model? Like, I'm going to buy a used car. I'm going to do my own research. Well, why would you do your own research? Why don't you just trust the salesman? And it's funny how we just kind of lose sight of that. Like, well, you got to trust science. Well, the science is not a guy; it's a process, and it should be questioned. So at any rate, healthy level skepticism. I'm all about that. Sometimes I dig a little too deep and I get a little too crazy, but that's okay. That's why I have friends like you, Tony, that kind of keep me grounded and cause me to question my assumptions. So
skeptimistic.
So I appreciate you filling in for
Absolutely.
Dusty again.
My pleasure.
We will see you back again next week, and hope you enjoyed this episode. Bye.